Hey, welcome everybody to the new Livin a Dream Racing YouTube channel. Figured I'd start this channel so I can keep some updates with my racing and things that are going on with the team and some other stuff that's happening as far as me and Livin a Dream is concerned. I guess probably the biggest thing is that not down in Colorado anymore. We decided to make a big change. We had an opportunity to move back up here to Alaska, and so that's what we did. We're back up here in Alaska. I found a nice place, got a great job, and things just worked out. Kind of a good thing because I'd been planning to do this for a while. I just hadn't planned to do it this soon. It was more like about 3 years, 5 years down the road. But an opportunity presented itself, and I jumped on it, and here I am. So we're going to be racing up here in Alaska primarily. If I get an opportunity to run down in the States, get some sponsorship to help out with that, we'll go down. But in the meantime, we're just going to work on things up here. Lots and lots of updates. Lots and lots of updates. First off, the website, I haven't updated that in a long time, and I'm going to try to work on that over the Christmas holiday a little bit, I think. Put some new stuff on it, change a few things around, and kind of make it look a little better. Not something I've been real proactive on, so please apologize for that, but we'll work on it. Last year, things started off pretty much normal. Came into the new year. Car was in a trailer because I didn't have a garage to work in on my property there in Colorado, and it didn't really have a whole lot planned for the car anyway. March rolled around, did the car show at Lincoln Tech where I was employed at the time, and then 4th of July comes around, and I'd already planned to take the car apart at that point in time, get the engine fresh and do some updates with it and change a few things around. But I got an invite with Rocky Mountain Superchargers to go do the event in Julesburg, Colorado. And the deal with that is no entry fee. It was a Saturday and Sunday. We do 3 runs on Saturday, 3 runs on Sunday, $200 per round. Just take the green light under power, and you get paid. And I figured, you know what? It'll be fun. I'll go beat up on the supercharged guys a little bit, and make a little bit of money to put back in the car. So I went ahead and jumped in and decided to do that. My friend Jim went with me to help crew for me, and also my buddy Danny, who runs an alcohol funny car, decided to go ahead and go up there and run that event. Overall for the event, it was a lot of fun. Treated pretty well up there, and had a pretty good time. I was 4 rounds up, 2 rounds down for the weekend, which not too bad considering I was the only nitrous car in the field, but we got her done. The problem came in the last round. I was running my buddy Danny, and got out, left starting line. We're getting down the track, and I guess around about 300 feet or so, give or take, I heard a loud pop, and that was it. Car shut off, and there was no warning, no other noise, nothing, just a pop. And so I coasted off the track, got the car back to the trailer, and happened to take a look at it and noticed that there were some cracks in the valve covers, which is not a good sign. So I pulled off one of the valve covers and found some of the rockers had actually been popped out of the head. What that generally means is something's bent or broken in a bad way. So went ahead and put everything away, and we finished out the weekend and went home. And I parked the trailer for a while. Didn't have any motivation to work on the car. Was doing some other stuff, and just decided to hang out for a while and call it good. So kind of even thought of selling the car at that point. I knew it was going to be an expensive repair, a very, very expensive repair. And I didn't have the money. And I was thinking about things, and I'm like, you know what? I've got other stuff that I need to do. I've got plans, and about the only way I'm going to be able to do that is to prioritize things and make some sacrifices with others. And so I started really contemplating selling the car. And as luck would have it, I get that thought process going a little bit, and later on, I changed my mind. I decided, you know what? No, I'm not done racing yet. I know it's going to take a while to fix this thing and fix it right. but we're going to go ahead and do that. Um, One of the big decisions that I made is on the entire combo. Um, the car had been working reliably, but there were some things about it that I didn't like. I did it the way I did it because I was told that's how you needed to do things. Um, I was running some parts that some people had told me that because of what I was running, that's what I needed to have. So um, that's how I did it. And when I finally got the motivation to start working on things again and start looking at things, I started taking a close look at everything. And I decided, number one, I wanted to change up the car a little bit. I wanted to rewire it because all of the wiring in the car was old. It was used wire that I had laying around when I did it in the first place. Um, a lot of the stuff I had was either used or very, very dated, and I wanted to replace it with new stuff and change things up a bit like that. So, because I wanted to make sure that things were going to be reliable and I didn't have any issues, although I didn't really have any issues with the car at that point, electrically. Mechanically, a different story. But I decided that, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, and we're going to start over again from scratch and put things together the way I want to do it, with all new stuff and make things better. So that's where we started. Went ahead and started tearing into the engine, and of course it wasn't good. Got the intake off, got the heads off, and what had happened is I'd broke a connecting rod. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, there's a lot of bias out there, there's a lot of bullshit out there on engine parts. And I'm going to tell you what I found in my stuff. I don't care what your opinion is or what you know to be fact or anything else. I'm going to tell you what I found and the reason why I'm not going to do things the way I did last time. It's going to disagree with you a lot, but I really don't care because, one, this is my stuff, not yours, and two, the problems that I had and what ended up as an engine failure in this was because I was running things that other people said that I need to run because of this combo. We're not going to do that anymore. Never again. Once I started tearing the engine the rest of the way down, I started getting a look at things. What had happened is the number 2 connecting rod had broke. And some people said that I spun a bearing and that's what broke the connecting rod because the journal on the crankshaft has got some discoloration from spinning a bearing. But that's not what caused the connecting rod to break. The connecting rod pulled apart right below the pin. And what happened is the engine was still running at that point. The rod broke. Crankshaft came down. Going back up, it shoved the connecting rod up into the camshaft tunnel. When it did that, that's when it spun the bearing. Because if you look at the rod journal, the rod journal for the other one isn't burned at all, and it's only burned a small portion of the journal on the rod that did break. And if you move the crankshaft to the position of where the rod getting jammed in the cam tunnel would have been, it corresponds with the burn mark on the crankshaft, meaning that just the physical force of wedging the connecting rod up into the camshaft tunnel is what caused the bearing to fail. And that's exactly what happened. And then the connecting rod broke again. That chunk wedged itself into the camshaft in the tunnel, stopped the camshaft, and broke the timing belt, and basically bent all 16 valves in the heads, pushed several rockers completely, the stands completely out of the heads, pulling the threads out, and split one of the push rods down about an inch. Surprisingly enough, none of the rockers broke, which was kind of amazing, but they did take some serious abuse. Looking at things initially, that was the first time I've ever run aluminum connecting rods. Consequently, it is the last time I'm ever going to run aluminum connecting rods. Never again. Didn't have a lot of passes on those rods. They hadn't seen a lot of severe service at all. I'd always warmed my engine before I made any passes. I never made cold passes. And according to the manufacturer of the rods, who I'm not going to get into, because all connecting rod companies that make aluminum rods have had failures. So I don't think there's any one that's better than the other, even though they'll tell you they are. Um, the fact of the matter is the rod broke, period. That's what happened. All the other damage was a result of the rod breaking. I will admit, having aluminum connecting rods and a timing belt saved my block from a lot more serious damage, and it's allowing me to reuse the block. I'm still not a fan of belt drives, not at all. But I'm going to continue to run the one that I've got because I've got a new belt for it, got all new seals for it, and all of that stuff. And what happened was no fault of the belts. I would rather put a gear drive on it. I prefer gear drives. I think they're superior in every way. I think belt drives are way overrated. The only reason I have a belt drive on this one now is because when I first bought this block to build this engine, a gear drive was not made that would fit the block because it's a raised cam block. And for this particular one, there weren't any gear drives available at that time. Since then, of course, they're as common as anything. But right now, I can't justify spending another $1,700 for another camshaft drive when I have a complete one ready to bolt on, ready to go. What I will do is, after I get this back together and running again, I'm going to go ahead and save up and buy the gear drive, so when I freshen it, I can swap them out. And that way I'll eliminate the potential of a belt failure. But I will admittedly, I had no problems with the belt drive when I was running it, and again, having it saved it from a lot worse damage than it could have been. But I do not think belts are the way to go. I think a gear drive is the best way to drive a camshaft in a racing engine, period. Say what you want, don't care. Like I said, I'm going to do things my way. I've ran gear drives in the past, both on the street and in racing applications, with zero failures, zero problems, and none of the symptoms that everybody keeps saying that they have, which, it transmits harmonics to the valve train. Bullshit. Pete Jackson gear drives, the cheap dual idler ones, yeah, they do. The single idler fixed cover style gear drives like the Mylodon, RCD, no different than a timing belt. Okay, so there's no advantage to a timing belt. The belts stretch. You actually have to advance the cam slightly to accommodate the stretch, especially when you start running really high spring pressures, high RPMs, and high cylinder pressures. That's a well-known thing with those, and belts can fail. It's as simple as that. But again, I said I'm going to go ahead and reuse this one because I've got everything. It's just to save me a little bit of money right now until I can get the gear drive purchased. But once I started tearing everything down, I took a good look at everything, and I started noticing some stuff. There was a lot of pitting and damage to the bearings that should not have been there. When I pulled the damper, which was an ATI Super Damper, pulled it off the crankshaft, it was blatantly obvious that there had been some micro welding and that the damper was moving on the crankshaft. There was other issues. I kept having flex plate bolts come loose despite being torqued to spec and using red Loctite. They kept coming loose. And I had a lot of valve train issues in this engine. A lot of valve train issues. Rocker arm adjusters coming loose, not the adjuster nuts coming off, even after just one pass down the track. Shit not staying in adjustment. One of the things I did to combat that is I switched the valve springs. I went from PAC to a PSI spring, and that settled the valve train down quite a bit. Ask Bob Book about PAC valve springs, and I'm sure he'll enlighten you on how much money they cost him. But I just switched the valve springs to the PSI version that I was running, and a lot of my valve train issues went away. I still had issues. They didn't solve all the problems, but the rocker arm stayed in adjustment at least. And I wasn't having rocker arm nuts laying in the head because they'd backed off and all of that stuff. So I didn't have that problem anymore. But the valve seats were getting beat all to hell. The valves were getting beat all to hell. And just some other stuff that was going on. One of the issues that I had too was I had push rod clearance issues on a couple of the ports because of the angle of the push rods and the rocker arm offsets and the way the porting work was done and everything. I was push rod limited on the intakes. I had to run a 7/16 to 3/8 single taper, and that barely cleared the port. And with a push rod that's over 11 inches long, those were nowhere near big enough, not even remotely close to being big enough. And you could see the flexion, the polished area on the port, polished area on the push rods where they were hitting. And despite having a little bit of clearance in there, they were still touching and bending. And that was another issue that I was having, because my valve train was not in control very well. Lifters, I was going through about a set of lifters a year, actually sometimes 2 sets a year, because rollers were getting beat up, and it was killing the bearings in them. And so there were some issues going on there. The issues in the bearings, the mains, and the rod bearings. The flex plate coming loose. When I put this together, I was told that ATI super dampers are the best dampers that there are. So I bought into it, and I bought one. And I called ATI, and I said, this is what I got. What do you recommend? They recommended one, and I put it on there. And, they told me it needs to be rebuilt every year. Well, I figured out about how many passes it would take for me to equal a year's use on that damper. And I hadn't made a year's worth of passes yet when I had the engine failure. Close to a full season of passes, but not quite. When I called ATI and told them some of the stuff that I'd found, because all of the signs I'd seen in the engine resembled signs of detonation, bad detonation. But the problem is there was no signs of detonation in the combustion chambers. There's no signs of detonation on the pistons. There's no signs of detonation on the spark plugs. And that's where you're going to see it first. You're not going to see it in the bearings first. You're not going to see it in stuff coming loose and micro welding and shit like that. It's going to be in the spark plug, piston crowns, and combustion chambers first, because that's where the initial damage is going to take place. And with some other stuff that had been going on, that's also a harmonics issue. That's harmonics in the crankshaft or rotating assembly that aren't being dealt with like they should be. And the only thing I could think of that was an issue with that is the damper. And it was a 7-inch damper, because I was told, use a 7-inch damper, not the 8-inch. You need a 7-inch. Well, I called ATI and said, this is what I found, and this is my conclusion with things. And I said, there's nothing else that it can be. It's got to be that there's an issue with the damper. And they're like, well, which damper do you have? I said, well, the one you told me to buy was part number such and such. And they said, that's the wrong damper. Really? I called you guys, gave you my specifics on my combo. That's the one you told me to buy. Now, the one you told me to buy. And now you're telling me that it's the wrong one. Thanks, guys. So regardless of how highly regarded an ATI super damper is, regardless of how good people say they actually are, that's another part that will never go on my engine again, ever. I have ran fluid damper in the past for decades. 0 problems. None going back to one. I actually spoke with one of the engineers for a little bit at Fluid Damper, which was kind of enlightening. Didn't get to talk to the salesperson. I actually spoke to the engineers that build and design these things. It was fun. A good conversation. One thing I'll tell you about ATI. ATI slams Fluid Damper pretty hard, but ATI doesn't have any recent test data, nothing published to show how superior their stuff is, other than a little graph that's on their website that's been there forever. Fluid Damper's more than happy to show you all the test data they've got. They're more than happy to show you everything. And there's some lies, outright lies out there about fluid dampers, breaking crankshafts, not allowed in NASCAR this, not allowed in NASCAR that. They lock up, the gel hardens up. All total lies and bullshit. Okay? It's all total lies and bullshit. And for people that believe it, you guys do a little bit of fucking research. Okay? Go out there, study the stuff that's going on, look at the stuff that's going on. Okay? Fluid dampers don't break crankshafts. Okay? Crankshafts break for other reasons. But anyway, like I said, there won't be another ATI product on my engine ever again. Not because their stuff isn't good, because they do make an excellent damper. It's because they lied to me, period. And when I told them I had a problem with their product, they lied to me again to cover it up. So fuck them. I'm not going to use their shit no more. Just like I'm never going to run aluminum rods again. Aluminum rods have their place. I don't think it's in any sportsman engine at all. There's supercharged engines out there making upwards of 2,500 plus horsepower running steel rods without issues. They're not having bearing life issues. They're not having any of that. It's not a fucking problem. So it shouldn't be a fucking problem. So I'm going back to connecting rods. And the ones that I'm talking about that I'm going to be running are Molnar. Out of all the engine builders that I know, Molnar's products came across as one of the highest quality rods that you can buy for the price point. In fact, there's not really any rods that you can buy at 3 or 4 times the price point with the same amount of quality. And I spoke at length about connecting rods to Tom as well. He didn't try to sell me anything. Not once did he ever try to sell me his rods. Not once did he ever try to say that if I don't run his rods, then I'm going to have problems or anything else like that. Tom took the time to explain to me everything about rods. And for people that don't know who Tom Molnar is, Tom Molnar has probably forgotten more about connecting rod design and engineering than most people will ever know. He originally designed the Oliver parabolic I-beam. He had designed a K1 H-beam rods, and now he has his own line of rods. He went out on a business for himself. Talked all about that stuff. He told me about the metallurgy in the rods. He talked to me about beam shape and thickness and all of this stuff, and what types of rods are better for what types of applications. He taught me about clamping force and what kind of bolts. And his rods, he actually has a proprietary bolt for him because he didn't like how the threads were in standard rod bolts. So he did an asymmetrical thread, which he says provides not only more clamping force, but it's a stronger bolt than what's typically available in most other connecting rods. But again, not once did he ever try to sell me a rod. I asked him questions, he answered them. Gave me a lot of background information on stuff. He said, do your own research. And he says, you come to a determination. Decide what you want to buy then. I buy his rods. And after pulling them out of the package and looking at the quality of the rod, the overall finish of the rod, yeah. And Tom's willing to stand behind his product. He flat out told me he'll stand behind his rods. He'll put them up against anybody else's rods any day of the week. And that to me says a lot. So running his rods, going back to steel rods, going back to a fluid damper, and all that stuff. So where are we at with the car? Well, I've decided, like I said, rip out all the wiring and completely redo everything, and that's what I'm doing. I've got a new dash made. I went from a Mega 400 delay box, which was getting pretty old. It was still working good, but I don't like using it when I'm in the car. The reason being is there's too much stuff that you have to do to change a setting on it. Now, don't get me wrong. The digital delay boxes sold by Biondo or directly through Digital Delay, they're awesome. They're very high quality boxes. They've got incredible features on them. They work very, very well. They're a little pricey for what they are, but hey, you're getting what you pay for. They're a quality box. But for me, after using one for many, many years, they weren't as racer friendly as I think they should be. Like to change a dial in, you have to completely erase the entire dial and type in a whole new one. And the keypads are, even with gloves on, they're not the best. Okay, the newer ones, from what I understand, are better, but I didn't want to go that route. But another thing about them is their size. The Mega boxes are fairly large, and in my car, I don't have a lot of dash space, and dash space is at a premium. So I decided that I'm going to switch to the K&R box. I know a few people that run them and love them. I know some people that switched from a regular Mega box to the K&R box and said it was the best thing that they ever did. I've watched a lot of informational videos on them and stuff like that, and talked to some other racers that run them, and I decided that that's the direction I was going to go. So I went ahead and bought a K&R box. The things I like about it is, one, it's so simple. It is so simple to use. If I need to change the dial, I can change any number on the dial just by flicking a switch. I don't have to type in a whole new dial, and it's that quick. It's got a reset button on it. Not having a reset button on my Mega box cost me a race. Because of a mistake I made, it cost me a race. Well, K&R box has that reset switch where you can reset the box again if you make a mistake, but it's also got flinch protection. So if I accidentally release the button before I want to release it, I can hit it again, and it'll disregard the first release. So it's got some features that I like on it. The biggest thing is its compact size. It's a lot smaller than the Mega boxes, and with dash space at a premium, like I said, in my car, it just works out a little bit better because it gives me some more room on the dash that I needed, and I like it. So it's out of the way. It's easy to access. Everything is easy to do on it. Um, it's quick, and it does what I need it to do. So I went ahead and changed over to that. Something else I did is I've been running a butterfly style steering wheel for the longest time, and I decided that, you know what, I want to make a change there too. So I decided on the steering wheel that I was going to go ahead and get one of the Delta steering wheels. And the reason being is, one, it's easier to maneuver the car when you're in pits when you're pushing the car, because trying to turn a butterfly steering wheel and push the car at the same time is kind of a pain in the ass. But it places the switches in a different plane for me. My grip is different now. The switches are in a different plane, and my hands are more neutral. On the butterfly, I had one grip in the wheel and one on top while I was pushing the button. On this one here, you know, I'm like this. It's more neutral for me. That's one of the things that necessitated the change for the dashboard. Is my visibility of the dashboard changed with the steering wheel. Of course, it's blocking some stuff and everything. So I moved stuff around, and I really didn't like how I had the dashboard anyway, but I did it like that because that's kind of how it had to be done with the stuff that I had, because it just wouldn't work any other way. Well, now I've got it rearranged. Everything is easily reachable. Stuff that needs to be out of the way is out of the way. Stuff that's I need to be able to reach easily, I can reach easily. And I think it just looks better as well. I am putting a new oil pressure gauge in it because I'm going to be running a lot more oil pressure this time around. It was something I didn't do before. I'm going to this time. And my oil pressure gauge doesn't go high enough, so we're replacing that gauge. Otherwise, we're using all the other stuff because it's still in perfect condition and it works good. Another big change that's going into the car is my main battery cutoff. The trend with pretty much every new car that's built nowadays, they're using electric cutoffs. They're using electric solenoid as your main cutoff. The advantage to doing that is a couple of things. First off, it eliminates a push-pull cable in the car that can seize up or bind up. It eliminates having a linkage of some sort that can break or strip or something like that. Even though I've never had any problems with it, it's, you know, the potential is still there. But the biggest thing about it is it's lighter in weight and it's easier. The push-pull cable setup that I had in the car before, the cable was starting to get stiff, and the cables are pretty expensive. I mean, they're not as expensive as the cutoff switches that I bought, of course, but the thing is you know, it's weight in the car that I can get rid of, and it's easier with the electrical stuff. Just a couple simple wires and done. Nice thing about it now is I can put my main cutoff on the dashboard of the car, so I can turn the battery on and off from the driver's compartment without having to get out of the car, go to the back of the car and pull or push or whatever, and all of that. The switch that'll be at the back of the car, small, compact. There's no rule saying how big the switch has to be, only that it has to be push off and it has to be labeled, which mine is, and you know, that's going to be it. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. So I'll have two switches in the car, the one in the back and the one in the front, and I'm just going to wire those in series, and they both have to be on for the car to work, and kill one kills everything. It's going to be nice and convenient. I moved the battery a little bit because I wanted to change things up, and I built a new bracket for it, and that was more just to gain some room behind the battery that I didn't have before. And I don't think that change is going to really make much of a difference on anything other than I can't just take the battery out of the car when I take the clamp loose. Now I have to take the clamp and one of the strut rods that I made for it out to get the battery out. But it's not something that I intend on changing, you know, round after round after round. If I'm having that many battery issues, then there's a problem and I need to address it. So that shouldn't be an issue. Let's see what else with the car. We're going to freshen the trans. We're going to put a new gear set in it. We're not really changing anything as far as that is concerned. It's more of just replacement of parts. The gear set that I've had in the trans has been in there for a very, very long time. It was given to me. It was used at the time. The carrier was used. And the gear set I got is just simply not rated for the power level that I'm going to be making with the new combo. So we're going to go ahead and replace that and then just refresh the trans. Trans should be in pretty good shape overall. The fluid's still nice and clear. There's no debris in the pan or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and just do a seal kit on it and put a new planetary in it, call it good. I am going to change my cooler. I currently run a Shogun, a chrome-plated Shogun cooler. It's been getting the job done, but as you guys know with chrome, on anything that needs to cool, chrome actually retains heat, which is not a good thing. But the other thing is it makes it harder to drain a transmission too, because with a Shogun cooler, the only hole on it other than where you attach the lines is in the bottom of the cooler. The one I'm going to be putting in there is very, very similar. They were out for many, many years and then they quit making them. That's the B&M environmental canister. It looks like a black version of the Shogun cooler, except that the brackets on the end bolt to it instead of them being welded, and it's got a fill port on the top, as well as a temperature port and a drain port on the bottom. They both do the exact same, except the B&M's is coated with a black coating, which is designed to dissipate heat. So I'm hoping that helps moderate the temperature just a little bit better, although I never had any temperature issues with the transmission. Not at all. I'm going to be replacing transmission lines with a little bit larger lines for a little bit better flow. And I need new ones anyway, so it's just about that time. But that's about all that's going to happen in the transmission. The converter that's in the car is about perfect with a 250 shot of nitrous on it. The new combo on the engine, the old converter should be pretty much perfect for NA. It's not going to be enough converter for it on the bottle, which I kind of got lucky, and I scored a bolt together 10-inch Neil Chance converter online. There's another racer up in, I want to say it was New York, that was selling it. The price was right. And so I asked him for the information on the converter, and I said, don't sell it yet. Let me call Neil Chance and talk to those guys and see what they say about it. I want to make sure that if it's not right for my combo, that it's at least pretty close. And he says, not a problem. So I gave Marty a call and told Marty what it was, gave him my combo, gave him the numbers off the converter, and he goes, you know what? He says, that's about the same converter that we would build for your car. He says, the difference is we would change the stator in it. And he goes, it should be pretty close as is. Though he goes, what I want you to do is when you get your car back together, he goes, run it, get me some data, get me some run data off of it, and then send it to me. And he says, we'll know which stator to send you at that point. So I get this converter, spent $700 on it. All it's going to need, according to Marty, is going to be a stator change, because he said he would use the same pump and everything on my build if I ordered a brand new one. So that's kind of cool. It's an older steel one, yeah, so it's kind of heavy, but not a big deal. I paid $700 for a $3,500 converter, and it's going to be like another $500 for a stator once I get him some data. But still, when you look at the overall cost of it, not a bad deal. I can't afford a $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 converter when this one will work just fine. So I'll have two converters for it. I'll have my NA converter and I'll have my nitrous converter. We're going to hit it pretty hard with the nitrous, just to make sure that converter is properly configured for this thing. But aside from that, that's it on the transmission end. The biggest change on the car is in the engine. And again, I've been talking about that. I'm going back to a fluid damper. It's going to an 8-inch instead of a 7-inch damper, by the way, which is better for a longer stroke, which is what I have. Some of the new parts that are going in it. I ran an Ohio crankshaft billet crank in it before. Never had any issues with the crankshaft. None. But a friend Dave Olson at Mile High Crankshafts, he took a look at the crank, and he was a little skeptical on repairing it and reusing it for my application, knowing that how hard I run this thing and how much power I intend to make. And he's like, I don't know. He said, maybe it'd be better for another application and not quite that much power. So I said, well, I was hoping to reuse it, but if you're saying that it's not going to be the best, or it's not going to be an ideal choice, then we'll go ahead and start looking for a new crank. So I did start looking at new cranks, and of course along came Calais. called them on one of their Magnum cranks because their billet cranks were way out of reach, and called them on their forged cranks, and they were about 30 weeks out. And that was kind of crazy. They were wanting about $3,400 for one, which is, they're going right. So it's not like I didn't expect to hear that. It's just pay that kind of money and then have to wait around 30 weeks, half a year or more, or better than half a year. And I waited almost a year for my connecting rods. I didn't want to wait another 30 weeks for the crankshaft. And that's when I got a message from Bob Reinhardt at Madcap Racing Engines. Now, Bobby's moving on to a new adventure in life, and I wish him the best. And he's a great guy and fucking smart guy when it comes to building engines. But he sent me a message, and he goes, "I have a new crank." He says, "I've got one sitting on the shelf." And I said, "It's a big block Chevy, standard rod and main journals, 5-inch stroke, all that good stuff." He goes, "Yep." And I kind of cringed just a little bit because I know Bob. Bob won't build an engine without a new crank in it. He doesn't repair them. He won't build one without a new crank. And I kind of cringed because I already knew what he was going to tell me. I said, "What is it?" He goes, "It's a Winberg." Winberg crank's probably the best crank out there. There's a couple right up there with him, Bryant, Moldex, Calais Billet, but they're top of the line, top shelf crank. I mean, you're not going to get any better by anybody else's, and they come with a price tag, really big price tag, and that's when I really cringed. And I go, "How much?" I'm not going to tell you how much I paid for that crank. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you that I did buy it. Bob gave me one hell of a deal on it, and I didn't really ask. I just kind of assumed that what had happened is somebody had ordered it and then bailed on it, and it had been sitting on a shelf for a while. Winberg cranks are not a stocking crank. You don't stock a Winberg crank. If you want a Winberg, you call them and order it. That's just how it works. This one had been sitting on a shelf for a while. Well, I go down there to pick it up, and lo and behold, big block Chevrolet, 4840 bore centers, stock or standard rods, standard mains. Counter rates are cut for a minimum of a 7-inch long connecting rod. And go figure, I run a 7-inch long connecting rod. So it was like it was a match made in heaven. So Bob made me a deal on it. I bought the crank. Took a mic to the crank because when I first bought my Ohio crankshaft, I measured it out, and its journals weren't perfect. I mean, they were all within spec, but there was some variance between all of the journals. Not on the Winberg. Every journal is exactly the same. Every single one is exactly the same. So that just gives you the difference between a low-end crank and a high-end crank is much more precision. And this thing is a work of art. It's beautiful. I'm not sure what kind of bob weight it was set up for, but I do know the rough bob weight that I need, and I don't think it's going to be an issue balancing it. It's going to take some weight. It's going to take some alloy in there, but I don't think it's going to be an issue balancing it out. The pistons that I ran before, I've ran for a long time. Good pistons, and Rob over there at GibTech is always taking care of me. But when I called him for a new set of pistons this time around, he was saying 16 to 18 weeks. And at the position I was in at the time, I really didn't want to wait that long. Because by the time I started gathering parts and everything, an opportunity to move up here to Alaska, and the one that I ended up taking had already presented itself, and I was in the process of putting that deal together and making it happen. And I didn't want to be waiting on parts or have parts being shipped there when I was going to be moving up here. So I decided I wasn't going to pull the trigger on GibTech pistons this time around, and I went ahead and called JE, gave them the information that they needed to make me some new pistons, and they went ahead and made them. Now, I am upset at JE for a couple of things. Number one, when I put in the order, I asked for round wire locks on the pins. They gave me double spiral locks. Is that going to be an issue? Probably not, but it does irritate me a little bit that I asked for them and they didn't give them to me. The other thing is if you look at them, the overall finish quality on the piston's just not as good as a GibTech. It's not that they're junk pistons, they're not. I know a lot of people running JE. I've never heard of anybody having any issues with them. It's just, you get used to one thing and you kind of expect it with everybody else when you don't see it. Yeah. And then, of course, I had the skirts coated, and it's sloppy. The coating on it is sloppy. I'll just leave it at that compared to the Gibtex, which are very, very nicely done. But there is a huge difference between the JE and the Gibtech, and that comes to weight. The JE is using a heavier piston pin by about 15 grams, something like that, or 10 grams. I think it's around 10 grams, something like that. But the piston itself is 115 grams lighter on the piston itself than the Gibtech, and that's huge. That's that much weight off the reciprocating side of the rotating assembly is pretty gigantic, considering that my connecting rods are fairly heavy. I took, just out of curiosity, I took and weighed one of my old piston and rod assemblies, complete with rings and everything, and weighed it. And then I took one of my new connecting rod and piston assemblies and everything and weighed those. And there's less than 120 grams difference between the entire assembly, from an aluminum rod to the steel rod. The reciprocating end of the assembly with my steel rod is significantly lighter than the reciprocating assembly of the aluminum rod. So I'm gaining some mass in the rotational portion of it. I'm losing a hellacious lot of mass in the reciprocating portion of it. And that's not a bad thing, because I do plan on spending this thing a few RPM. Another thing Bob hooked me up with, again, he had them in stock, and I went ahead and grabbed them because he had them, was a set of BAM lifters. Now, these are the really good ones. These are the DLC coated steel pin ones. So there's no bearing in it. It's a DLC coated pin. And Bob said he's been running those in pretty much everything that he builds, and he's had no failures, no issues in over 5 years with those. And I think that speaks volumes, because there's a lot of Bob stuff out there running, and the fact that he's had no lifter failures or anything else, that speaks to the quality of the part. And BAM has got one hell of a reputation right now for building some damn good lifters. I've been running Crower severe duty with the high pressure pin oiling option without an issue. But the two sets that I have have both been rebuilt twice already, and the bodies are starting to get pretty scarred up. And Bob said he won't rebuild them more than twice. So I figured we're going to go ahead and get new lifters. And the funny thing is those BAM lifters didn't cost me any more than the Crowers. They were about the same price. So went ahead and went with those. And I know the BAMs can be rebuilt, and I'll probably end up buying another set of those eventually, so I got some spares as well. So we did that. So where's the biggest changes in the engine? Well, that's the big news. I love my cylinder head guy. He's a great guy. He's phenomenal at what he does. But even he admitted to me, he said even the Dart 11 degree heads that he did there, where he works, are better than the Profiler 12 degree that he had done for me that I have. One of the biggest issues I had with this engine, other than the obvious, the valve train issues and stuff like that, was no matter how quick the car was on the track, ET wise, the mile per hour was always the same. I was running very low sevens, high sixes in Florida in a quarter mile, 179 miles an hour. As fast as we go mile per hour wise. In Bandimere, I was running low 730s, and again, 182 miles an hour. So between 179 and 182 miles an hour. It's all the fastest the car would go. Didn't matter what the ET was. 180 miles an hour, period. And that basically tells you something, that it's not running that hard on the top end. The first half of the track car ran like a rape date. It was fast as hell. Sub 1 second, 60 foot times. 101, 102, 60 foot times in Denver. But it just wasn't mile per hour. And A lot of the racers there at Bandimere, they had similar combos, 648-inch engines, 650-inch engines, running like out-of-the-box 12-degree Brodix heads or the Dart 11-degree heads. They were running anywhere from a half a tenth, 500ths, up to about a little over a tenth faster than me, and they were running anywhere from 5 to 8 miles an hour faster. And that was with a single 4-barrel. I'm running dual throttle bodies and alcohol injection. My car was slower with gasoline carbs on it. So it tells me that something was wrong. Something wasn't right. I had a good tune-up in it and everything else, but it just didn't want to run on the top end at all. So I decided when I had the engine failure, of course, cam took a whack on it. Probably polish it out by hand and still use the cam, but I'm not going to. I decided to get an entirely new top end. I've been doing a lot of research on different cylinder heads, what they had to offer, and everything else. And I decided that Matt at MBE with his Big 9 program is probably one of the best cylinder head programs out there for Big Block Chevrolet right now. Granted, there's a lot of others doing them, and their versions of them, and they've got some good stuff out there, some fast shit. But the DN9 from Brodix, Matt helped develop, and his version he's been working on since that head first came out. He's been doing it pretty much longer than anybody else has, and he's made huge gains with that head. And the builders out there are still finding horsepower with that head. One of the things I was told is, that head it's kind of disappointing for what it is. It's not performing the way it should for what it is. Well, think back to when the SR20s first came out. The SR20s came out, and when people started running those, they were fast. They were built for a specific class, Texas Outlaw Pro Stocks, and those heads were fast. When everybody seen how fast they were going, everybody wanted them. And as soon as everybody started getting them, all of a sudden the problem ran into is they don't run. They couldn't figure them out. They didn't make the power. They didn't run as fast as they thought they could. Until the builders started figuring out what the heads liked and how to make them work. And then people started going fast. And they're still finding ways to make those heads go faster. So if you want a conventional head, that's a badass head. A bunch of different versions out there. Matt's got his own version. He's got an 18-degree version, which is even better than that one. Some other builders have their versions out there. But those heads they've come a long way. They told you couldn't run alcohol with them. Well, there's people running alcohol with them now. There's people saying you can't run nitrous with them. There's people running nitrous with them. Saying you can't run superchargers with them. And there's people out there running superchargers with them. They just had to figure out the heads. Well, the 9-degree heads are the same thing. Relatively new in comparison to some of those other cylinder heads that are out there. And the builders are starting to figure them out. They're starting to find power. There's 632-inch combos out there right now making well north of 1,400 horsepower, to where the best you could do with like an 11-degree Dart before was in the high 12s or low 13s. So they're figuring the stuff out, and it's just a matter of the overall combo. I run 665-inch and I'm alcohol injected. Best damn move I ever made was going to alcohol, and even better move going to injection. That my car was faster, 2.5 tenths and almost 5 miles an hour faster on alcohol than it was on gasoline. So, and it solved some problems for me performance-wise as well. So, never going back to gasoline because of that. But I decided to pull the trigger, and I got the MBE Big 9 top end package. I did the HRE sheet metal intake. It's got the billet runners on it. Some miscommunication on the configuration of the intake, but for the most part that's been resolved. Not exactly the way I had hoped, but we'll make it work. Like I said, there's just some miscommunication on it, but doesn't mean that the manifold's not going to perform. It's just on how things are configured. But the manifold built for my combo, built for my engine by HRE, and it's pretty. It's pretty. Costs a lot of money. It's pretty. The whole package costs a lot of money. One of the biggest things that I went with that package too is Matt's rocker system, the TND rocker system that he's got for him. He designed that with TND, and that rocker system is rigid as hell. I got the steel rocker arms. It's got the one-piece bar on it. the one bad thing about the profiler heads that I had before is a lot of rocker arm deflection, especially on the intakes, the offset ones. It ain't happening on these new ones. And there's very little offset on them to begin with. The rocker arms are substantially stiffer. They're made of steel, have bigger bearings in them. And then the one-piece bar, it's heavy. I mean, that bar is freaking heavy. It's not a thin bar that attaches to the head. It's thick. It's every bit of 3/4 of an inch thick, or it might even be more than that. I don't know. I'll have to measure it, but it's thick and it's heavy and it's rigid. I mean, that's going to translate into motion going back. And Brodix spread port heads are different than the Dart and the Profiler anyway on how their ports are located, because even Brodix says on their website that offset lifters aren't needed with their spread port stuff. Well, I'm going to be running offset lifters, 200 offset on the intakes, and with that, I'm going to be able to put gigantic push rods on the intake side because I'm going to have all kinds of clearance for them. I'm putting 5/8 inch push rods on the exhaust. I'm probably going to have, I'm hoping to put a 5/8 to 9/16 single taper on the intakes. If they'll fit, that's what I'm going to put in there. If not, we'll step it down to a straight 9/16, and if that doesn't fit, then we'll do a 9/16 1/2 inch single taper. But either way, it's going to have big freaking push rods in it. We're not playing the game of flexing push rods anymore. And a lot of people think, well, those are huge. Why do you need such a big push rod? You got to think these push rods are over 11 inches long. They're approaching 12 inches long because I run 10/7 inch deck. And then you allow for the height of the heads and the rocker system and everything else. I have long push rods. But the other thing you have to think about with all of this too is I run a lot of lift. I'm going to be running over an inch of lift on the intake on these things. And I'm running a lot of valve spring pressure. I'm running over 1,200 pounds open pressure on these things and almost 400 pounds on the seat. I need stiff push rods. When they're that long, you got to have stiff push rods. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. And it was some of the issues I had before with the valve train being unstable. It was just not happy. I was breaking valve springs all the time, adjusters coming loose like I'd mentioned before, and just generally not happy. And I think that was probably costing me some of the power on the top end because once I got above about 7,300 RPM, the engine just nosed over. It just didn't want to make power anymore. We're fixing that. We're not going to do that no more. Another major change that I'm going to on the engine was I'm tired of phasing distributors. Tired of fucking checking the rotor and making sure that it's in the right position and everything else, and then making sure that the contacts are clean and all of that stuff. I'm going to the coil near plug system, the MSD Pro CDI 600. I'm using the hottest coils that they have, which Stevie Fast used on his stuff, and he swapped that ignition at the track, ran the mag one pass, swapped the ignition, and went faster with the new ignition. So it's hot enough to fire his stuff. It'd be more than hot enough to fire mine. It's going to clean some things up because now 8 individual coils, but no distributor. So I'm kind of figuring out where I can mount everything right now, and kind of got it figured out, but it does present a mounting issue as far as the coils and the ignition box itself, but I'll get it figured out. It's not a big deal. But yeah, we're going to that setup and getting rid of the distributor altogether. The nice thing about that is the tuning ability. It's going to allow me being able to do individual cylinder timing like the grid normally does, but without having to have the fiber optic pickup over number 1 spark plug wire. Okay, this automatically does it just through the coils. So I'll be able to program every cylinder so it's as happy as it can be, as much advanced as it needs, and when I got a pull timing, it's going to be even easier because it's all just keystrokes now. So other than tuning the fuel, the ignition is going to be super, super easy to tune. No more stuff to move around. So looking forward to that. This thing should be fast. It should be really, really fast. When I was getting the heads done, gave Bullet a call for the camshaft, told them what combo I was putting together, what heads I was going to be running and everything else, and they ground me up a cam. Night and day difference between this cam and the one that I had before. Huge, huge difference between this cam and the one that I had before. Duration specs are completely different. A lot more lift, a lot bigger lobes, different lobe separation, different lobe center lines, everything. So this thing's going to make big power. It's going to make big power. It's going to turn some RPM, and we're going to go really, really freaking fast. So I'm excited for it. But aside from that, that's where we're at. So I'm in the process now of rewiring the car. I'll get some video of what I've got done so far and what I'm working on, and I'll post that as I get it done. As my engine gets completed or stuff starts coming back from the machine shop, we'll start putting the engine together, and I'll video that whole process on how I do stuff. Again, I know there's people that are going to say, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're not doing that the way it should be done, and you should be running this and not that and all this other stuff. You know what? I don't care. I don't give a shit. It's my stuff. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. My stuff has never let me down. It's never fucking broke. The only time I've ever had issues with something is when I've done something, somebody else told me this is how it needs to be done. This is how you should be doing it, because that's how the pros do it, and that's how these guys do it. And that's when I've had problems. My stuff has held up. So that's how we're going to do it, is the way I want it done. Besides, it's my car. It's my fucking money. If you don't like it, too bad, so sad. If you don't like it, give me the money to do it a different way and pay for everything. There's just some things I'm not going to do anymore. And I'm advancing my program to the next level. This car is going to be fast. It's going to be extremely fast for what it is. And I'm going to doing it the way I want it. So I'm not trying to be an asshole or sound arrogant on it or anything else like that. I'm just telling you that, you know what? I've learned a lot with this last engine. I learned a lot with the combo on what it was doing and why it wasn't happy and why it wasn't performing better than it should have been performing. And, you know, I've learned. And we're going to fix a lot of the mistakes that I made, and we're going to fix a lot of the things that weren't right, and we're going to change things around to better suit, you know, what I want to do. And that's just that. So anyway, kind of rambled on a little bit on this video, but I knew this one was going to be a long one. I hope you guys take the time to check out my channel, like and subscribe. I still got to figure all of this stuff out, so hopefully the videos get better as we go along. And my editing will get better because I'm just starting out on this, so we'll see how it goes. But I hope you guys enjoy it. Like I said, again, like and subscribe, share it. I want to try to grow the channel a little bit and see where we can take it. We might at a later date start adding some stuff to this, like some of my adventures here in Alaska, ATVing and otherwise. But for now, we're just going to stick with the racing stuff and see where that takes us. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and you guys have a great night.